you can't do anything for other people unless you've taken care of yourself. To be present in moments now just makes me so I don't miss those little things.
Ellen Alden is a mindfulness and breathwork teacher with an incredible story of transformation and recovery from chronic illness.
I've had long COVID for 2.5 years, and there aren't any treatments and there aren't any cures. I lost a lot of my identity. I couldn't write or read, and a lot of different parts of me that I thought were me were lost. I thought, what can I do to heal myself? Because I know that that's what the body does, and that's where healing takes place. Maybe I can find, a little inner peace.
So many things were kind of taken from you, right? But you still chose to focus on what you had control over, which is your mindset and how you work with you. It's okay not to feel at peace.
It turned out, what the best thing was actually
Hello, everyone. I've been so looking forward to sharing today's conversation with Ellen Alden. She has an incredible story of transformation and healing from long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome using mind body practices. Ellen is the owner of Stressless Studios, and ever since her diagnosis with long COVID, she's been implementing mindfulness and mindfulness meditation practices to aid in her recovery. She's a teacher by training, but also has many other certifications, including mindfulness based stress reduction and breathwork certification from the Oxygen Advantage, and also certification in laughter yoga. She specializes in helping individuals with chronic illness and long COVID, and she teaches stress reducing practices, breathing techniques, and mindfulness tools to improve mental, physical, and emotional health. So if you're interested in improving any of those, join us for today's episode. Ellen, a warm welcome to you to the Pause to Elevate podcast.
Thank you, Cassim. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Your story is quite remarkable, an incredible story of persistence and really turning to something very difficult. So I wonder if you can share with how did you get interested in mindfulness and working with just challenges the way you have?
Well, let's see. I was a little resistant to the practices initially, actually.
Mm,
I was kind of living a certain way, and, didn't really realize I had such low key anxiety and
mm,
kind of living on autopilot. And then I just realized during the pandemic that it was becoming overwhelming and that it
mm,
was really getting the best of me, and how I was dealing with work and trying to sleep and a lot of other parts that were affecting my life. And as most people, were becoming very anxious, I really was starting to show up in my day to day life. So I
mm,
sought out a psychologist, and with the
mm,
psychologist, they're the one who actually recommended maybe you could try meditation to help you, but it just wasn't happening in the beginning because I was so anxious that I really found it difficult to sit alone, and I really had this thing in my mind that people who were peaceful or who could do meditation were definitely of a certain uh, breed, like people that were already very peaceful, or
mm,
so I just didn't think it was for me, and that I really had access to inner peace. But I
mm,
decided to sign up. I found through reading a bunch of different mindfulness books, even though I couldn't do it, I was so curious about it once he had mentioned it. So I started getting some Joseph Goldstein books and Pima Chodron and
mm,
all different types of people. And I started reading more about meditation. And then I found the program at Brown University, and I just took the 8 week, I signed up for the 8 week MBSR program just to see what this was all about, because I was really curious.
So that's a mindfulness based stress reduction. For those of you who are not familiar, so MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction. Yeah.
Right. So I took that 8 week class, and I was very shocked that just by introducing some of the mindfulness practices,
Mm,
how I was starting to shift a little bit, how I could
mm,
be just a little bit longer with my thoughts, and that I didn't have to stuff everything down, that I could meet some of the stronger emotions and thoughts that were coming. So
mm,
that was the beginning, really. Knowing even just that my thoughts weren't me was really revolutionary to me. I thought that I had to believe everything that was happening. And that's why I had so much anxiety. But when I found a little space between, myself and my thoughts, and kind of didn't get as entangled with them, let
mm,
some of these thoughts actually kind of pass by, or emotions, and I realized that they don't stick around forever. Then I was really able to, I think, even get more centered, kind of get to more of a higher self place, then, rather than just in my, ego where I was.
mm. You know, that takes courage, especially when it's uncomfortable, right? So you're naming how your journey is just stress, feeling anxious, and the anxiety made it difficult to find this stillness or calmness, or even like close your eyes if you practice eyes closed and just kind of sort of feel stuff, because it's not comfortable to feel anxious or any other emotions. Not comfortable to feel sad, not comfortable to feel angry. So I guess there's something for you that you were willing to go and experiment. I think that's an important trait. Like you were willing to experiment, to go, let's see what happens. Like you could have closed the door
Right.
and not given it a like, so nope, not for me. But what kept you going when it wasn't?
Well, I think that, reading the books and
Mm,
learning about other people's experiences too, and then when I was taking the MBSR class, I noticed that there were people just like me who had the same type of challenges with meditation. And I actually started doing mindful walking, or walking
mm,
meditation, because that felt a little safer in my body, to be
mm,
moving. I had a tough time in the beginning just to be sitting down, but then when I was moving and walking, and meditating, oh, I just felt a little bit better. Like I didn't need to. And then eventually, I was able to sit down, and now I, meditate for 45 minutes at a time or so. So I think what
mm,
kept me going, though, was not only people's, other people's experience, but my own lived experience. The fact that I
mm,
was becoming a little bit less anxious, that I could have moments, little glimmers of peace. And, I don't know, I slowed down a lot in this time. I was just a
mm,
constant doer. And, so it felt good to actually have a little break, and, just to get out of the chaos for a little bit. And that feeling that I had when I was out of the chaos and in like the eye of the storm just felt so um, different, and it was so
mm,
different from my baseline. And but it felt wonderful, and I was like, wow, maybe I can find, a little inner peace. And and then I accessed a lot of different resources that I also, one after the other, that I didn't know where it was there also, and I needed those, thank goodness, while I got when I got sick.
mm. You know what you did is you really gave yourself a chance to give the practice a chance to support you, right? You gave it a chance, and that's something that I often share with folks who are considering MBSR, mindfulness based stress reduction, which I teach as well. Um, and remind them it's okay. It's okay not to feel at peace,
Right.
right? I had a conversation with this Zen monk, and he talks about this, being at peace with your unpeacefulness,
Right.
right? Like, and that was really powerful.
Feels
Like,
like
wait a
our
minute, be at. It's not about like peace, meaning like I have nothing that's bothering me and everything is wonderful, and like peace is I can, like you named it, in the eye of the storm. Like, it could be a storm, and we don't have to like the storm, but that's the practice, like being at peace with the
Yeah.
unpeacefulness.
And then what
Yeah.
I found is, when I came back to the storm, back to the chaos, it was just a little bit more manageable. I
Mm,
felt like I had some time. It was either because it was away from it, or because I used some practice to calm my body. And then when I went back into whatever was happening, it didn't seem as huge or overwhelming, and that I could actually, find a way through it instead of, losing it. And so I was
Yeah.
much less reactive, and I think I just responded better. More
Yeah.
wise.
So I guess that's the proof in the pudding, right? Is when you experimented, you notice, oh, this is helping, and that's encouraging. I can imagine when you see like not just what's happening in a book or someone, but like for you, you're like, ooh, there's something here. I guess
Yeah.
that's gets you going, right? Like you started noticing.
Oh, and that's what keeps you
Yeah,
going.
yeah,
If you're
yeah.
asking what keeps me going was, right, if I had just read about everybody else, I would be like, good for them, good for them, good for them, but I still wouldn't have believed that it could happen for me. But, as I, did the practices, as I did the work and kept trying, to persevere with, yeah, my own private meditation practice, then I noticed I was getting just a little bit, bit more benefits from it. I was sleeping better, which was really great.
Mm,
And, I didn't feel as anxious during the day. And I just think that I was more present too. And
yeah.
that was a huge thing because, I was feeling like life can pass you by so quickly. And, I have kids and they grow up so fast. And, to be present in moments now just makes me so I don't miss those little things.
Mm. What a gift that you're giving your family, friends, and people around you to be present with them. Because it does go by. Like life really does go by. Like,
It does. It really
yeah.
does. I think it affected my relationships a lot too. I think I'm
Mm,
a little nicer, a little more patient with people, and
yeah.
I think I'm a better listener. So, and not so always hyped up and having to be, the you know one impressing people or something. Just trying to be with another person and listen and enjoy their conversation, and that
Mm,
was really kind of a big change for me.
yeah. You're mentioning as well about this, feeling anxious and kind of doing the doer, you're saying. And sometimes we fill things so we don't feel things, right? So we fill so we don't feel it. And if we don't feel it, we think it's going to go away. But often, you know, what we run away from comes right back, doesn't go anywhere. So what you did is actually you kind of turn to it. You turn to it's okay that there's anxiety. It's okay. And how can I work with it? It's not about, um, I'm not supposed to have anxious thoughts. But I guess you recognize, you said earlier, how it's just a thought. I don't have to believe it. Like that's powerful when you like you know that directly. It's just a thought. It's an anxious thought.
Right. No,
Yeah.
because I had such, that rumination,
Mm,
and when I learned to shift my, even out of that I had a little bit of, I wouldn't say control, but I was able to find a way to shift from that when I was aware. Before I wasn't even
mm,
aware I was having rumination. But then, as I became more aware, I could shift a little bit out of it and I didn't have to be stuck in that cycle anymore. And that was just like, freedom. I didn't know
yeah.
that it would, if it meant like going for a little walk or listening to music or, bringing something else more positive in. I did a lot of imagery, so
Mm,
and visualization. So those things really helped me, so I wasn't so stuck, in the same place.
mm. Because that's very discouraging, getting stuck and stuff. And talking about like getting stuck, and you had to deal with long COVID. So, and for listeners who don't know, like, what is this long COVID? I wonder if you can share, like, what is long COVID, and even if someone doesn't have long COVID, like your learnings, anyone can benefit from because we all have something to deal with. If it's not an illness, if it's an injury, it's dealing with the unwanted. So your insights are really helpful here. So can you start with like what is long COVID and what was it like first, and then we'll talk about your journey through it.
Well, apparently long COVID, which is a post-viral syndrome, and it isn't really that new because apparently there's been post-viral syndromes from a lot of different viruses that might have come around, like people who have chronic fatigue syndrome and Lyme, chronic Lyme and things like that. So it just means that there's something going on after the initial, so I got COVID, but then,
Mm.
the symptoms kept going, and the symptoms are really, really difficult. There's what they call it, a constellation of symptoms, because it can be anything in your autonomic nervous system. So migraines, heart that goes berserk.
Oh.
My blood pressure was all over the place. Temperature was hot and cold. Uh, Complete inflammation, and even inflammation in my brain. And then, yeah, so the brain fog too. So it was just like, felt like a full body assault. And, the fatigue was really tough too. So I was bedbound for a long time, like 9 months.
That is a long time.
Yes, and that was in it. Even after 9 months, I still wasn't better. I just could walk a little bit without getting completely dizzy. So the whole, I had long COVID for 2.5 years, and
Mm.
now I'm just on my way out of it. Thank goodness. And I used a lot of the meditation and mindfulness practices to get me
Mm.
where I am. And I feel so fortunate, because so many people are still, some people are still in it from 2020. So that's for almost 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Lots of people
So many people are still kind of stuck in it.
stuck in it. I mean, 18
Yeah.
million people in the United States have long COVID. So it's a big,
Oh, that's a big number.
and there aren't any, this is the part that was the most difficult. There aren't any treatments, and there aren't any cures. So you're
Mm.
given a diagnosis, but there's no way to fix it. And when you feel like you can't be fixed, and you don't know how long it's going to last, and you don't know if every time you have these things called crashes, where you just have a full
Mm.
body, kind of like taking a battery and put it on empty, and that's called a crash, then you don't know how long those are going to last, or when you'll get back to work, or when you'll get back to socializing, or, so that was very difficult.
So that makes it even more difficult because there isn't a clear, like, oh, in one more week
Yeah.
you'll be this much better, or in 2 more weeks. Like, no, there's no kind of end
No.
date. No one gives you like, okay, in 6 months, like you
There's
don't
no
like.
protocol to treat it, like to say, "Okay, now
Mm.
we're gonna do this." The doctors were, kinda got a lot of, "We're not sure, we're still researching this, maybe an experimental thing here, experimental thing there," but, a
Mm.
lot of those for me didn't pan out. I went all over the place looking to, I went to Mount Sinai and just a whole bunch of different, hospitals to try and get treated, but it turned out, what the best thing was actually turning inward, and things that I could do. While at least I was waiting for appointments, and while I'm waiting for a cure, I thought, what
Yeah.
can I do to heal myself? Because I know that that's what the body does. But when we're
Mm.
so dysregulated, it's very difficult to try and, but I realized that, breath work is something that actually helps regulate the body. It also made me feel safer in my body,
Mm.
and calm me down, got me out of fight or flight into rest and digest, and that's where healing takes place.
Mm.
So, and I did take that breathing course, like the person that you had on. It's true about the nasal
Yeah.
breathing, and I learned so much about giving my body more oxygen that it needs, more rest that
Mm.
it needed. And then I think what was really interesting, and is that at one point I lost a lot of my identity. I couldn't
Mm.
exercise, which was a huge part of me. I couldn't write, which is or read, but I'm a writer,
Wow.
and a lot of different parts of me that I thought were me were lost. It was just kind of like one thing was stripped after the other. But I realized, this is my
Mm.
biggest thing, was that there was still something left, which I thought I would be like, there'd be nothing there,
Mm.
where'd Ellen go? But it turned out, I discovered that, I found that there was the essence of who I was still intact. And then I couldn't lose that. And that was, I never thought I would discover that. So peace and joy and love were still there. I still had the capacity to love people. I still
Mm.
had the capacity to appreciate nature and art, and, and I still could find very small moments of joy, throughout, for little things like my children visiting or something like that.
Mm.
So it was really interesting to see that I hadn't lost everything. And I think that was part of the transformation that I was saying, is that that became so big. I thought the part that, I was all the parts that I had created. And who gets that
Mm.
opportunity to lose everything? Not many.
Wow.
And I did. And then I found that I didn't lose everything. I actually found what's most, my true nature.
Wow, how beautiful is that share? And I know you're right about this as well. This, how COVID stole your identity, but you found a new one. Really beautiful. Like this,
Thank you.
I'm just trying, like, for listeners, just imagine all the things that you love doing, you can suddenly can't do anymore. Like, if it's reading, you can't read anymore. If it's writing, you can't write anymore. If it's walking, you can't walk.
Socialize.
Socializing, you can't socialize. It's exercising, you can't exercise. Like literally, and some people, if it's not COVID, it might be, accidents that have happened or concussions. Like things happen. They're like, I can't, my life, how I knew it, is no longer the same. So I guess like what it's quite amazing. Like I can imagine like dark times, but something in you. What would you say for for listeners who are wondering like how do I do what she did? Like you did something
I
so
tell you that I,
so.
went through, the
Mm,
stages of grief with this illness. I got
mm,
angry. I first denied it, and then I think that I did just what I could do, and that was I surrendered one day, and just in a crash that I just said, there's nothing I can do right now to keep trying to make this happen. I can't get rid of this. I can't fix this, you know.
oh,
So I just like just broke down crying, and I just surrendered and trusted in hopefully that my
mm,
body would get better. Trusted in something larger, just did what I could, and kind of just gave up with the outcome, and just said, let's just see what this process is going to be like. And then all of a sudden I got a more positive outlook on it, and I was like, wait a minute, what about belief? What about the belief that I can get better? And that just came out of nowhere. I'm like, oh yeah, and that
mm,
really helped when I shift my mindset to that, mindset that I was kind of stuck, rather than I went into like a growth mindset, like, I'm going to keep believing that I can. And then I used visualization. I saw myself doing stuff even before I could walk across, my lawn. I saw myself doing that, and saw myself on my tennis team again, and biking, and doing all the things that I wanted to do, paddle boarding. It's I live in a summer town, I mean a beach town, and so it was like all the things that I was watching people do for the last couple of years. I'm like, I'm just going to picture myself doing it,
mm.
and that really started to help me progressively get better.
So you actually use visualization as well in your process. Like you see so many things were kind of taken from you, right? With COVID. So many things with long COVID, so many things were taken, but you still chose to focus on what you had control over, which is your mindset, your perspective, and how you work with you. I think so. That's really very powerful what you shared. Very powerful. And I want to just go back to something else you said. That's I really want to highlight it for listeners. That's really important. I see this often in my one-on-one work as well. Um, is you said you start focusing on the process and letting go of the outcome. This is huge. Can you share a little bit about that? Like what what does that mean? Because that's a huge factor for change. Letting go of the outcome but focusing on the process.
Right. Well, I had, always been, I would, when I was sick, I was thinking, okay, in 6 months, it was the winter, by the summer, I'm definitely going to be better. And then that time
Mm.
would come, and I wasn't. And it was the biggest disappointment ever, and then I would say, but by next 6 months, well, that's, a year, that, that is going to, and then it would come. And then I didn't know how long this is going to be in that. And then I got completely panicked, and just thought,
Mm.
is this my life now? And then I just, when one day when that surrender happened, I thought, what about if I, just kind of see how, not put an end date on it, because that keeps, giving me more anxiety. And also it seems to be really, really that expectation. And that if I don't meet that expectation, it was only hurting me, making me
Mm,
suffer more. So I thought, well, what if I just make this as a process, and, like the seasons that are natural, the winter comes and the summer, and rather than thinking that I could, control it, that it would have to be over by this certain time. And then I started focusing on the little progressions that I actually was able to see, instead of if I
mm.
was all the way healed, and that felt really good too. And,
Oh,
I sort of looked at, being happy with a little bit of improvement. I also gave up the past of saying I'm going to get back exactly how I was before. I'm going to be able to run that exact, time that I used to run,
right.
or bike that exact same way. I said, you know what if I can do this in a different way? And then I realized that when I used to play tennis, all I'd want to do is crush people anyway. And so now I've changed a lot to, like, when I can play tennis again, oh, it's about being outside. It's about being with another
Oh,
wonderful person out there who's also wanting to do well, and it was about the nature, it was about the time. It was just so different, or so many things changed in that. I didn't have to be so hyper competitive. I could be enjoying the time more, slowing down too. Now I can't run, I can only walk, so I was like, oh, but there's so much more you can see when you
oh.
walk. I mean, I'm seeing birds, and I'm like, where everything is so beautiful. I felt like, Henry Thoreau. I'm like, it's just because it's, I really was going too fast of a pace to take in the
Mm,
littlest things. And, now I stop and take pictures all the time, stop and, literally smell
hmm.
the roses. So it's very different. And I think the other thing was just that I tried to see if there was meaning in this. And though that is the meaning that I'm talking about, maybe it was time for me to slow down just a little bit, and, be more present, like I was saying.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I think many people, I mean, many of us, that's what led me to the practice as well. It's like rushing to the finish line that we've built in our head. And what is the finish line? It never ends. Like, I just got to get to this, or finish this project, or get this thing, and then this thing. And then we're chasing endless finish lines. Well, it's like we're chasing the end of life. Like, what are we chasing? And somehow for you, like, it's not something you ask for, but your mindset and working with something like that really took over life, like it changed your life, but you used it to change how you look at things, which is, in mindfulness practices, one of the teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, says, no mud, no lotus, right? Like, if there's no muddiness, lotus doesn't grow. And you chose to work with the muddiness, because not everyone does. Some people stay stuck in just mud.
Yeah, I mean, and
Mm.
and and that reminds me too of, yeah, heal thyself, Santi
Saki Santorelli, yeah.
Santorelli, right? And, just taking that journey down to the depths, and I really think that I did. I didn't think it was could get much lower, and there were times, believe me, I was in hopelessness and despair. But the
Mm.
fact that I kind of dug myself out of that, and by meditation, having some little glimmers of what things I could look forward to, or in meditation looking at my thoughts instead of just being
Mm.
overwhelmed by them, and so there was nothing I couldn't look at with meditation, because it was
Mm.
non-judgmental. I could get more curious about things even happening with sensations in my body, rather than being like, oh no. The other big thing that I wanted to say is that I changed my relationship to fear, because fear is so prevalent in when something's happening to your body, when you're in a
Mm.
shutdown and you can't do the things that you normally do, it's just can really make you panic. And so, but then I had to realize that the symptoms might be there, but again, sensation is just a sensation. Like, it can be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be unsafe. and that helped me do have less crashes and actually start to get better too. And I started doing cold plunges, so I thought, well, if a
Mm.
sensation is just a sensation, I tried to believe that. I was going in the middle of February, breaking through the ice, and sitting in there for a minute or two.
Oh,
But it
wow.
really did help me to get that real feeling of a sensation is just sensation. It's how you look
Mm.
at it. And I would try and look at it as, oh, I'm in a warm bath, or and the sensations in my body that were happening during long COVID, I tried to see them as symptoms that are telling me something and that I can listen, rather than being so scary, so frightening, so
Mm.
dangerous.
Hmm. So there's so much there I'd love to unpack for listeners, because it's really, your insights are very powerful. So
Well,
you
well,
you
that I
know,
got from David Sarno's book, John Sarno, The
Mm.
Mind Body Connection. So, and I did
Yes,
use that a lot to get better also.
yeah, but like your hunger for learning and applying, right? Like you learned and applied, and I want to go to this relationship to fear that you named. So part of a change you did is you changed the relationship you have with things, because the things that you didn't want weren't changing. So you change your relationship around them, like the symptoms you're having, the challenges you're having. And can you say a little more about, because this is really important, this changing relationship to something you can't change, like the fear, the symptoms.
Right.
Um,
Right. Well, I didn't want them there for sure. And I was looking at them as, something that I needed to avoid, that I needed to fix, that I wanted to be different than the way they were. Then I realized I can't do that. So what I can be is look at them through a lens of, well, I'm kind of curious, like that thing is really changing, or,
mm,
I looked at, oh wow, well that makes, I was so unembodied before. So now like, oh, that thought really makes my heart start to beat, or, just started to get more of a mind body connection. And then also, just I guess thinking about how I can look at them with a little more kindness and compassion too, because I needed
mm,
compassion. And, it's so easy to have compassion for other people, and especially if somebody else I knew was going through this, but it was myself. And at first, there's a lot of shame and blame that how come I'm not getting better? Like everybody, so many people with COVID got better. Like my whole family who got COVID, everyone was better within a week or two,
oh,
but then I didn't. So what was wrong with me? That was I weaker? Was I, and I think that really, and people would say after a year, you're not better yet. And, it was just like, I would be like, oh no, it made me feel really, really bad. So, but then I had to bring in that compassion and say, well, I'm not wanting this to happen. I love
yeah.
exercise. I love socializing. I love all those things. It's just not available to me right now. So I had to be okay with that.
Hmm. That's another really key piece, is kindness, is compassion, because we can beat ourselves up, right? Like, fear of, like, just missing out. I can imagine probably you had many moments where life felt like everyone is moving on in life, but you weren't. Like, how do you deal with that? Like this.
I mean, I definitely thought that, that can
Mm,
be like a core fear that, that you were out of the
mm,
game. And I felt like a bystander or someone, on the sidelines, and
oh,
everybody else was into their regular, life. And I was so worried that my friends were gonna move on. I was so worried that I used to host everything for my family, that, that I couldn't show up for people the way that I used to, even, my direct
mm,
family. And that was, probably my greatest suffering too, more than all the symptoms, was that I just felt like this just, I felt like that people were going to, I guess, abandon me, or just, drop me.
yeah, yeah. Because it's painful when things are progressing slow. Like we all have our own image of how things should be. Like by
Right.
this date, even if it's not an illness we're dealing with, like by this date I need to be at this much, whatever, whether it's income or whatever it is. We
Or
have,
weight, right.
weight, yeah, and then it isn't. And then, oh, that can trigger so much, like failure, embarrassment, and giving up.
All of it.
Yeah. So how powerful you applying these to work with setbacks.
Yes, and, because I
Mm,
just understand that how so many people are also going through these, and I know I have the exact same emotions. I had all of them, and I worked through them, and because I brought in compassion, thank goodness, loving kindness, whole bunch of different types of meditations to guided meditations to really help me through this, to
mm.
be an ally when I didn't feel like I had any.
Yeah, yeah. And these are such beautiful practices. I just finished teaching a retreat, a 7-day mindfulness retreat, and that's one of the practices we bring as well to the meditation is loving kindness, compassion. It really does, like, softening of a heart, softening of a mind, brings goodwill to ourselves, goodwill to others, because the mind can get very angry, hateful, vengeful, and we end up kind of boiling inside. It doesn't help us
No.
in the journey.
No, I noticed that anger popped up with me a lot, and
Mm.
it only made my symptoms exacerbate. And that was not something that I needed. So I thought, oh, what is another? So I was looking for, I think I was reading, hang on, I'm forgetting her name. What is the big loving kindness person? The woman,
Oh, Sharon Salzberg.
Sharon Salzberg.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And it was her first, I think it was, it might have been called Happiness or it might have been called Love. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
I can forget that part out. But anyway, I was reading one of her books
Mhm.
and yeah, it really, really came to me that she, was able to evoke a lot of self-compassion and that I could give that a try. At first it
Mm.
didn't feel that genuine. I kind of went through, the different parts of the loving kindness meditation, just kind of wrote, but then and I was really good at giving it out. That was one of my best parts, but receiving it was much more difficult. But then
Mm.
it started to come in a little, especially when I was really sad and before I never was a crier and couldn't let things out. But then I would just kind of let myself be that because I realized it is a sad thing that I'm going through. I mean,
Mhm.
I was really energetic and really, and then with the fact that I couldn't, have energy to meet a friend for
Yeah.
coffee, was just like, what? I couldn't tell a story without getting exhausted for like a week after.
Wow.
And so it just felt like I lost, just so much. And, but the self compassion is what brought me back to, you know, it's okay for now. And the other thing was meeting myself where I was. And it was so hard to do in the beginning. But I realized there's no other choice. You can't make yourself
Mm.
get ahead. You can't, bring yourself back to where you were. I had to be in the present and be realistic because that was the only time I could make a difference. I could rest more
Mm.
or I could drink more water, electrolytes, and, do the things that I had to do to nurture
Mm.
myself. And that's how I could show up for people is by, taking care of myself first and trying to do everything I could to get back to, you know, living in the world with everybody.
Yeah. That's so difficult for so many of us is the receiving. It's often easier we give to others. And there's something about being people pleaser, right? And I think we all have that quality. I know
Yeah.
I struggled with this really big time. And it was a teacher of mine in my graduate school in the early 2000. And he actually sat me down. He's like, you have to take care of you. Like you're entering a field of counseling. Like I would, my sessions would go over and over when I began, and it was a, practicum training, right? So they're watching what you're doing. This is like whatever, early 2000. And he's like, you're going to burn out. And you know what? He was right because I did ended up burning out like a couple of years into it. I just burned out. But, like it was people pleasing. It's tough, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
boundaries and right, and so I think I totally agree with you, I was a major people pleaser too, so that's what
Mm,
I'm saying, what can I learn and from this experience? I learned to take care of me, and, I was a mom of
mm,
3 kids, and you're just so busy taking care of other people and my husband and my family, and then I realized, wow, this maybe was giving me the experience of, you can't do anything for other people unless you've taken care of
yeah.
yourself, And so I had, was so sick that I really had to,
Yeah.
no choice. There wasn't a choice of, someone sitting me down, which would have been a little gentler, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay. I needed the, real, tough, hard approach, and so, being unable to do things and then gently coming back and knowing, though, when I had to have to tell people, "Guys, I'd love to be with you right now, but I gotta go, can't go to that concert, or can't go to, I really gotta take care of myself right now." And it was so hard in the beginning, but it got easier. And then I actually
Mm.
opened up to people too, got a little more vulnerable and kind of let them in a little. I hadn't told anyone I was sick for like almost a year because
Oh,
I
amazing.
just said I was off, but then maybe it wasn't a whole year, but it was a long time. And just because
Mm.
again, the shame of it, and, no one really knew what long COVID was, and I didn't either. And I wasn't sure, the doctors
Yeah.
didn't really diagnose it. So I didn't, didn't know what to do. So it felt good to, finally tell people that I'm struggling.
Yeah. But see, that's a mind shift change right there. That's a mindset, mind shift change is letting yourself be yourself and be okay with yourself and receive support, take care of you, because that ended up actually allowing you to be there for people even more.
Right.
I think that's a missing piece. People think it's selfish, and it's selfish not to take care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, how can we be our best self in taking care of family, friends, neighbor, clients, customers, whoever we're working with? And so you did the hard work to actually be there for others too.
Yeah, and I realized that,
Yeah.
I can't show up for people exactly the way they want me to forever,
Mm.
and which was always outgoing, always, oh, just in a certain way, and so I just, if I could only show up being, kind of sick, and if, that's the way I was, then, that's what I would do too,
Yeah.
and hope that people would be okay. Some people weren't, and but most people, were, and then I guess you can tell what's the real love connection.
Yeah. So you really give yourself permission just to be, and then those who really meant and had deeper connections stuck around, and those who didn't may have not.
Yeah,
Yeah. You said something earlier that just I found also really, really important to highlight is you weren't trying to get back to your old self. I think a lot of people, when something happens, whether it's an illness or a tragedy or a challenge, and they lose things, whether physical or something happens psychologically, it's like, I want to get back to this, getting back to before. And you actually highlighted that earlier. Part of your journey is realizing it's not about chasing the old self, it's about creating this new self.
yeah, the new
That's a,
narrative, because
yeah.
I realized that that bar may or may not ever come how I was. And also I
Mm,
realized there were parts of me that weren't as, this maybe, people say 2.0, this new version of me felt a little softer, a little,
mm,
like I said, a little nicer, a little more expansive, a little more, just open. And I kind of like that. So were there some parts I could kind of, you know, that was okay that they weren't there. And, instead of trying to get back to that certain place, which probably wouldn't have been possible, and it would have just made
yeah.
me suffer more. And, I just realized, hey, what about starting a new narrative? Or what about starting, this new version of myself? And we'll see, if I can find ease in that, happiness in that place, then I don't even miss the old version.
Ah.
And it could be better.
So finding the good in what you have rather than chasing the good from the past, like that's something. Because otherwise, we're just, you know, chasing air. It's like
Right.
it's
That
just,
took a while too, and that took a lot of,
yeah.
experience with mindfulness and meditation to get to that point too. By the way, it didn't just happen overnight. For the first year and a half, I wanted to get right back to where I
Of
was.
course.
And I wasn't going to accept anything less. But it just softened over time. And I
Mm,
realized the futility of that, because so many wonderful new things were happening. And I was, it almost felt like a new unifying system was happening. And because I felt the change like through every part of me, and I thought, I'm just going to go with this. For this, whatever's happening feels really good, and it's happening in my mind and my body. As I recover, something is
Yeah.
shifting, and so I just decided to, as they say, go with that process.
Yeah. And know that sometimes the process is difficult. Like, we're talking before we're recording as well about, going through the retreat you did, the mindfulness retreat. And this is when we first met. It's like, now that I think this was what, 2 years ago or something like that? I'm trying to
Two and
remember.
a half years ago, yeah.
2 years, yeah. I'm thinking, now that I know your story even more, like, wow, how did you even do that? Like, go through, a silent retreat. That's not easy to do. And would
No,
you say, yeah.
yeah, right. Well, I had signed up for it again thinking, "Oh, I'll definitely be better by then." It was probably 3 months after I stopped MBSR, so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be, better." That happened a lot, by the way. There was a lot of things I signed up for and couldn't go to because and that's why I had to give it up. But for this particular treat, I thought, "Well, it's silent. I don't have to talk," and maybe I could just sort of, rest when people are doing, the walking and stuff. But it still was such a challenge to be there and show up.
Mm,
And then I did not really expect, because here I was still a little bit on the stuffing down. I was still a little bit, was kind of new into the illness. So I was still sort of wanting it to be a different way,
mm.
and just really pretty much wishing that wasn't here. So I
Yeah.
didn't realize that when we were in some of the guided meditation, that things were bubbling up more
Oh.
than I expected that they would. Some of the fear just rose,
Mm.
like crazy, and my thoughts, like, oh my gosh, really, what if I'd never get better? Oh no, what if, what if this is the end? Like, just so many things
Yeah.
that, what if there's no doctor that's ever going to be able to help me get better, and this panicky thing. And I just remember that specifically, like, thinking, this is a lot to manage. And if, and I was a little bit in overwhelm, but I had a one-on-one with you. There's the check-in time when you are able to
At the
talk
retreat,
at
yes,
the
yes.
retreat, yes. And I remember just saying, like, "Oh, no," and just having you give me that space to just let it out and let it pass
Mm.
through me, because it needed to. I was
Yeah.
like a volcano about to erupt, and it actually did erupt. And, to have
Mm.
that feeling, which I really never had before, and I didn't realize the whole outpouring would be there. But, I let it pass. I
Yeah.
watched it come. I was in it, and then I watched it go. And that was my first little lesson on, how the mind and emotions
Mm.
are impermanent, and how they can come and how they can go. And, that was the beginning. And then I started to really get into, really looking at this more seriously, and seeing how it can benefit me, especially as I go through a chronic illness.
Mm. So many insights, like the direct knowing of impermanence of emotions and thoughts. Like, that's actually a really, we can read about it, right?
Right.
And we can hear someone talk about it.
Right. And Bob
you know,
Stout, who was in that, did such a good job of
yeah,
talking about that, that I actually felt the presence of it during some of the meditations.
yeah.
So, thank goodness. But yeah,
Yes.
to experience it, right, and to see it firsthand, the
Yeah.
direct experience of something that was really, really strong for me. It
Yeah.
wasn't just like a little sad thought or something. This was just like everything came boiling, bubbling up, and
Yeah.
but I could see it. And then what was left behind it, again, was a little
Mm.
joy, was a little peace from that, like, because I'm not holding that burden, and the expansion that I felt, I was like, "Ooh, is this what this is about?" Because it, really gave me, knowing that you just don't have to stay in a storm forever, that, the sun
Mm.
eventually is going to shine again. And I didn't believe that in the beginning. I was thinking that it was never going to shine again, and that the clouds were just in a full cover veiling the
Mm.
sun. And they, when I got a little glimpses of that, it was like, oh, good, so this is
Mm.
what I learned from, definitely from mindfulness and meditation, and why it's been
Wow.
such a big part of my life. And it's changed it in so many ways, just really how I see myself in the world. So
Mm. Well, there's so many people who this is really going to be eye opening. Even for me, hearing your story, it's quite incredible. And you really were like deep in the trenches of doing your work, doing turning in, working with the symptoms, working with the emotions, working with the thoughts, and you found your own agency by trusting your process in the journey, using this mindfulness. You worked with, you sought the right support, and you followed your intuition, and really that takes incredible courage. It really does. So it's just really a
Thank
deep
you.
bow to you for your journey, and for really, I think it's so important for you to be sharing this, because you have wisdom from going through it that so many people will benefit. And I know you teach as well, right? So you teach. So maybe we can tell listeners, um, what is the best way for listeners to find you? Is it through your website,
Yeah,
Stress?
through my website, which is stresslessstudio.com. I'm sure you'll
Mhm.
put it somewhere, but
Yes. Yes.
yeah, and I work now with people with chronic illness,
Mhm.
particularly long COVID, because I know exactly, how people are feeling, and people are still being affected by it, and chronic fatigue syndrome, and a lot of other um, things as well. I also work with children with test and
Mhm.
performance and social anxiety, and
Mm.
anybody who is has some stress in their life. Just giving some practical tools, like breath work and vagal stimulation and
Mhm.
laughter yoga. It can really be helpful. But yeah, just having people, hopefully get a little bit of a different relationship like I did
Mm.
to the things that are being, I couldn't use wisdom before because it was so blocked by my
Yeah.
fear and anxiety. I just didn't make wise choices back then. I made them out of fear. And this has just shown me to slow down, to get
Mm.
my body first into a calm state, and then suddenly, more wise. I could have a more wise response to things, which I never did because I was never
Yeah.
grounded before. I was so into that different self, and now I found like I have a center so much more. I have a self so much more, and I'm not going to say it's always. I can still, but I can emotionally regulate so much better than
Yeah.
I ever did.
There's a saying in the counseling world. You can take people as far as you're willing to go. So for you in your healing journey, wow, you've gone so far in your journey, and so that's why I feel so touched by your willingness to share, because that's how you can really support others, is when you've been through it. And so I don't know if that's all on your website, but I just wanted to highlight that, like, you've really been through a lot, and you're using it not just for you but to help others. And do you do also one-on-one?
Oh, yes, I also do one-on-one
Yeah.
coaching as well and workshops, but, yeah, I think the fact that I was
Mm.
there for all those emotions, and I have a really wonderful, recollection of what it felt to be there, and, all the different parts of the polyvagal ladder or whatever, being in the and being really, stuck, or being in fight or flight, or being,
Mm.
in when I wanted to be with people. So I think I have, and I definitely a good grasp on what I can relate. Is basically what
Yeah.
I can say. I can relate big time, and I
You can
can
relate.
validate people's experiences that they're having as well.
Hmm. Well, I'll put all of that in the show notes, the website, and all the social media connection. I'll put that as well. And I just want to loop back to one more thing, and just before we close, we'll see whatever else is on your mind. But you mentioned about cold plunges, and it's something that actually has been a big part of my journey as well.
Oh,
Cold shower, cold plunges,
yep.
and I wonder, for those who have never experimented, so it's like, what is it like to be starting that? Like for
Right.
you, going middle of all this, you're like, well, let's try cold plunges. Like,
I mean, I was at a place where I had so much full body inflammation that, I mean, I felt like the Tin Man who needed oil. I mean, I was just so uncomfortable that I thought, what could, freezing cold do? And, so the first ones were, rather unpleasant. I really had to psych myself up and just say, okay, sensation, just a sensation, visualize myself getting in there. And then when I did, it's the feeling, not necessarily while I'm in there, although did sometimes get more of a, okay, I can do this. Once you get your breath work under control, it was when I came out and I felt this feeling of vitality that, and I was sick,
Mm,
sick, sick. So I was not, being able to get out of bed very much, but I actually felt okay,
yeah.
like because everything was kind of, tingling and, coming alive after I started to get feeling back. And
Yeah.
it was everything to me because I got a feeling again of what it is to,
Mm.
what vitality feels like, even when I was extremely sick. So that for me was, and it also a lot of times it did help me, calm my nervous system, because I'm sure I was in fight or flight too. So it would bring me down, and I did it every day.
Yeah. See, that's persistent because the natural reaction, even if someone's trying like 10 seconds, 20 seconds of a colder shower. Sometimes people, start and they're like, "Oh, what do I do?" Right. So this is as simple, could be just a colder shower, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And, the normal reaction, the body will be just to hold their breath too
Yeah. Oh,
much.
right.
And
And you
it
can't.
forced really, the practice of it, as you're saying, is like just breathing into it, softening, relaxing, feeling a sensation, obviously doing it so it's safe. Everyone has to listen to their own body and,
Right.
check with your health professional. It just
Definitely.
just kind of just breathing, softening. It's actually incredible. Like it's an incredible like feeling.
It
I'm
is,
with you.
and
Yeah.
I live by the water, so I was able to go into the water, earlier, this season because that felt like nothing compared to, the ice cubes that I was in, and
That's amazing.
same with the summer. I've just been swimming even when people are like, "It's too cold." I'm like, "No," and it just again, I get that feeling of vitality even though I'm feeling better now, but yeah, I think if, people wanna try something that really can make them feel very much, alive, it can be bring on a new perspective.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really an interesting tool to try. There, know there's lots of science behind it, and
Oh yeah,
Wim
yeah.
Hof's been doing it,
Yeah.
forever. And it's just kind of can be an individual thing. And I think there's something so empowering too of when you're looking at that, saying, "There's no way I'm getting in that."
Everything in your body saying
Yeah,
no.
wear a
I like
hat and gloves, and I would
yeah.
be like, "What am I doing? It's snowing right now."
Yeah.
And then, but then that feeling of, "I can do this," and like I said, and I'm not a person that usually am that calm, but I could even get to a place where I would say, "Okay, I'm just gonna let and this and see how I can, relax around it." And
Yes.
even, and it's kind of as a mental challenge to see, like, how long I could be in there, and then because sometimes I'd be like, "Okay, this is it. That was good.
Yes,
30 seconds, I'm
totally.
out." Yeah, and but even that, I felt good about because I did it, and it feels so good to get a towel on afterwards.
So much like, yeah. And it's interesting you say this because however long anyone does it, the thought often doesn't go away like this is going to be cold. Do you know what I mean? Like it's still, I still have that, right?
Yeah.
Like after years, and but it just breathe, it's okay. Like the body's saying, ah no, I'd rather comfort and warm. And of course it doesn't mean like every shower is cold or everything's cold, but as a practice, cold can be quite incredible. And I actually had a chance to do a workshop with Wim Hof,
Oh, you
and
did?
he was a
Wow.
character. There was a lot of people. Like it was really, yeah.
Were you in
He
Poland?
No, no, he came to the
Okay.
U.S. Yeah,
Oh,
I came to San Jose,
ah,
and I went there, and it was, yeah. He's a
wow.
character. He's a firecracker. He's just like,
Wow.
and they had all these different tubs, but I had already done the cold exposure. I just wanted to experience him, and he's, yeah, he's an interesting character.
Yeah,
So
that and the breathing. So, wow,
yeah,
good
yeah,
for you. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I would just say that, when you want for me, I just wanted to have some feeling of that other people were having too, something,
yeah,
and so it gave me a feeling of normalcy and something that I could do at the time. It's not certainly not for everybody, and it's not sometimes it can be a lot on your nervous system, so you just got to be ready,
yeah,
and like you said, talk to your doctor,
yeah.
and yeah, because if you are ready and you have all those the green lights, then wow, it just becomes like a matter of you and the water, and what's
Totally,
and I love
totally.
that challenge of it.
Totally. That's so beautifully said. So true. And actually, listeners, if anyone is interested, I'm going to have a guest coming up soon, couple of weeks, that is a complete expert on cold exposure, and he has a book. By the time I'll have a podcast, it will be released about a full guide on how to do cold exposure. So if anyone's interested, uh, stay tuned. We're gonna have an expert on cold exposure coming up soon, because I'm just like you,
Yeah,
Ellen.
and
It's
I
a bit
heard that
hard.
the NHS, sorry,
Yeah,
the National Health for in America is
yeah,
actually doing studies on long COVID and cold plunging. So it will be interesting to see
amazing.
what that comes up with too.
I'll be very interested in looking at that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the benefits. So.
benefits. Yeah. Well, I tell you, this has been such a pleasure, not just to have a conversation, but also to hear about your incredible transformation, your change, and you know, you're not sugarcoating it. Like you named the truth of change. It was hard. It was difficult. You had to work through emotion. You had to work through physical pain, but you did it with such a courageous heart. I just want to really a deep bow to you. What a courageous
Thank you.
heart.
It wasn't
And
always pretty, but yeah, but
mm,
I did at least, I thought perseverance. I wrote down perseverance and patience, and I tried, even though I wasn't born with either of those. I tried to keep that up during this, and I'm really happy that I did.
well, I'm glad too, and I'm sure a lot of people will be so glad once they find out about you and your work. And any final thing on your mind before we end? Just want I really enjoyed this.
Um, I would just say, yeah, you're never too young or old to start, looking at things in a different way. I didn't have this until, my, let's see how old I am, till I was older. And, but, it just, mine came on in kind of a dramatic way, but
Mm,
just that MBSR program, which had me, kind of look at things in just a little bit of a different way, had me go inward. So
yeah,
it just gave me so many more inner resources that I could use that have
yeah.
really helped me with strength. And I didn't even know I was going to need those, but I'm sure glad I took that 8 week course because I needed all of these to get through. So
Mm.
if I really think about it, I almost feel like it was all kind of a journey that's been made, for me to kind of have a transformation.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you again for your work, for the like giving yourself a chance to create this change. This has been so enjoyable, so insightful. And I want to also thank all the listeners for listening, or if you're watching on YouTube. And may your moments be filled with ease, and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassim.
Thank you. Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.